Hello, my name is Hannah and I work in this building in Edinburgh. It is the head office of Bank of Scotland and it's also the home of Museum on the Mound, a museum all about money. We are going to be looking at some of my favorite things in the museum, which are some of the weird and wonderful things that have been used as money around the world. But first, I'd like for us to think about how we use money today. Now, during this video, I am going to be asking some questions. You can either listen along or you might want to pause the video and chat amongst yourselves and then rejoin us. Now, my first question is, what is money? What do we do with it? We use money to pay for things. We buy the things we need and sometimes the things that we want. We use it to pay our bills. We can use it to travel. We can save it, borrow it, invest it, donate it. But before we do all of that, we have to earn it. So we do a lot of things with money, but what do we use as money? Lots of people pay for things online, either with their phones or with cards, and there are two different kinds of cards, debit cards and credit cards. But what's the difference? When you open a bank account, you're given a debit card. So when you use a debit card, you're using your money to pay for things. When you use a credit card, you're not spending your money. You're borrowing it from a company or from a bank. But when you borrow money, you have to pay it back, usually with a little bit extra on top of it, which is something called interest. Now, while cards and phones make paying for things very easy, they aren't actually money. We don't exchange a debit card for something else, we hold on to it. These are just ways of making electronic payments. The things we use as money are coins and banknotes. Now, our coins are made out of different combinations of metal, copper, zinc, nickel, and sometimes steel. And banknotes are made out of plastic. You should each have a little white rectangle. This is what banknotes are made from. It's a special kind of plastic called polymer. But why do you think we make our banknotes out of that material? It's strong, so it will last a really long time, which makes it easy to use and easy to save. It's light, so it's easy to carry. It's waterproof, and it's cleaner than normal paper. It's easier to recycle, and it doesn't need to be replaced as often as paper notes, so it's better for the environment. And banks can also add a lot more security features to make it harder to copy. Now, they did lots of tests on different materials before deciding on polymer, and I want you to do a simple test with your bit of polymer. I want you to see if you can rip this. You might want to pause the video and have a really good go. Did anyone manage? It's really strong. You can see why we use bits of plastic and metal as our money, but the material they're made out of isn't actually worth very much at all. That's why I can send you some polymer and ask you to try and destroy it. It's not worth anything yet. Everyone has just agreed to use coins and notes as money, and really anything can be used as long as people agree. And there are some really unusual things that have been used over time and in different parts of the world. We're going to look now at something that was used long before we had coins or banknotes. It's the very first thing that was used as money. Now, for this activity, I'm going to need the help of a museum assistant from each group. I'd like you to take out the envelope that says, "What is money envelope 1?" But please don't open it just yet. In a moment, I am going to ask for everyone else in the group to close their eyes if they're comfortable. Then I'd like my museum assistant to take out the object and place it in the hands of the people in the group who should use their senses to try and work out what the oldest form of money was. Now, once everyone has a go, continue the video and I'll reveal what our oldest form of money was. So please pause the video now and try and work out what's in envelope 1. Did anyone guess what the oldest form of money was? It's a shell. You can pass it around again with your eyes open to have a good look at it. It's a special kind of shell called a cowrie shell. Now, before cowrie shells were used as money, they were home to lovely sea snails like these. Cowrie shells were used as money all over the world. They were probably first used in China about 4,000 years ago, and they were still being used in parts of Africa less than 100 years ago. So why do you think these shells made such good money? Why would so many people around the world want to use them as money? They're small and they're easy to carry. They're similar in size and shape, which makes them easy to count. There's always been a lot of maths involved with money. They're also durable, so they're not going to break easily, and you can save them for a long time. They were also something that people wanted, and that's very important. Long ago, the money that people used was precious to them in some way. So people liked these shells because they were beautiful. Sometimes they were even made into jewelry, like this fabulous necklace. Now let's talk about where the shells came from. Now the shells that you're holding weren't just found at any old beach. Most of the cowrie shells that were used as money came from the warm tropical waters of the Indian Ocean, and they were gathered in huge numbers from around the shores of these islands. They're the Maldives, just west of India. Now, because there are so many cowries in the Maldives, the shells were never worth very much there. But in China and parts of Africa, which weren't by the sea, these shells were hard to get, so the people thought that they were very valuable. So we know that if you lived in Sudan in Africa about 500 years ago and you had 10 cowrie shells, you could buy yourself a cow. Now, cows are still really valuable today. The average price for a cow is over £1,500. So these shells were worth a lot of money. And shells are the oldest money, but they're actually still used as money in some parts of the world today, which I think is really interesting. This person is holding up shell money beads in a shop. Shell money beads started to be used more during and after the COVID pandemic because it became harder for some people in island communities to get coins and banknotes. They stopped shipping them in, and they couldn't just rely on online banking because internet connection isn't always reliable. So they started to use shell money beads alongside the coins and notes that they had, and they've continued this today. So this isn't something that only happened in the past. So now that we've seen the oldest money in the world, we are going to have a look at the longest money. This is a beautiful form of money called a tevao. It was used on the other side of the world, just off the coast of Australia in Solomon Islands. And this is a picture of what the whole piece of money looked like. The tevao was wound up in a coil, kind of like a snake or a hose. And to see just how long it is, I'd like you to open What is Money Envelope 2. Now, I'd like for you to try and work out just how long this money was. The string inside envelope 2 is the same length as the tevao, so I'd like you to stretch it out across the classroom and estimate how long it is. So please pause the video now and press play when you're ready to find out the answer. So the tevao is the longest money in the world, and it is 9 meters, or nearly 30 feet. Was your estimate close? Imagine stretching that out to make sure that you had enough money. And now that we've seen just how long this money was, I'd like for us to have a closer look at the tevao. The outer surface of it is bright red. So what do you think gives it this amazing color? What do you think it's made from? It feels quite soft. And this is the natural color of the material. It's something you could find on a tropical island. It's made from feathers. The feathers came from a scarlet honey-eater bird, and as many as 500 birds were needed to make each tevao. Now, they wouldn't hurt the bird. What they would do is they'd catch it, they'd give it a haircut, and they'd release it back onto the island, and then they would take those red feathers and they'd glue them along the edge of up to 1,800 of the gray rectangles you can see in this video. And these were layered on top of one another and tied onto a base with string made from the bark of a rainforest tree. Now, tevaos were often made by teams of people, each doing a different part of the work. But if one person did all of that work, it would take about 1 year to make. So because it took so much time and effort to make this, it was incredibly valuable. Tevaos were only used to buy the most expensive things, but depending on where you live and when you live, things have different values. So for the people in Solomon Islands, the most valuable things would have been pigs or canoes. Pigs weren't raised on the island, so if you wanted them for a feast or a celebration, you'd need to travel to get one. And buying a canoe is kind of like us buying a car. It's how they got around the islands. So we've now looked at the oldest money with our cowrie shells. We've looked at the longest money money with the tevao, I have another 4 types of mystery money that I want you to explore in your groups. Now, in envelope 3, you either have a picture of the money with something in a bag to help you work out what it is, or you'll have the actual object that was used as money. And I want you to work together to describe the object. What shape is it? What does it smell like? That's sometimes a good clue for the next question, which is, what do you think it's made from? I want you to think about why people wanted this object, why was it valuable to people, and I want you to discuss if it would be easy to use as money. Would it be easy to carry around in your pocket? Could you save it for a long time? Each group has a different type of mystery money, so you might want to pass the envelopes around so you can investigate each one. Please pause the video until you're ready to discover if you've been able to identify our mystery money. Okay, money detectives, let's find out if you were right. Now, objects like this one were used as money. It's a cuboid shape. It's about the size and weight of a large book, and the smell may have been familiar to some of you. It's made from something you can drink. It's tea. So tea leaves have been ground up and compressed into something called a tea brick. And the tea leaves were made into brick shapes because it was much easier to carry than loose tea. In this picture, you can see people carrying huge amounts of tea bricks. Tea was the main drinks in the places that it was used, which is in some parts of China, Mongolia, and Tibet. And it was something that everybody wanted. It was valuable to everyone, and people were happy to accept it. So people would be paid in tea bricks, but you could also drink your money. So to make a cup of tea, you just break off a bit from the side and pop it into some hot water. But if you didn't fancy drinking your money, if you wanted to spend it, we know that in Mongolia, about 150 years ago, a sheep would cost you 12 to 15 tea bricks, and a camel was a bit more expensive. One of these would set you back 120 to 150 tea bricks. Now, did you think tea bricks would be easy to use as money? I think it would be a bit difficult. It's fairly heavy. It weighs 1 kilogram or 2 pounds, which is about the same as a liter of water. And also, if the tea brick got wet, it would fall apart. So while it might have been a bit difficult for us to use as money, people really wanted it because tea was such a popular drink. Now let's move on to mystery money 2. Now this money is oval shaped, it's hard, has quite a strong smell, and we make it into something most people really like, at least I do. They're cocoa beans. They're what chocolate's made from. Cocoa beans are the seeds of the cocoa plant, and they grow inside large pods like these. They were used in Mexico hundreds of years ago by a group of people called the Aztecs. The Aztecs didn't make chocolate from cocoa beans. They would grind them up with spices and water to make a really bitter drink. This picture shows a king having a cup of that cocoa drink. Now, only the wealthiest people would have been able to afford to drink their cocoa money. Most people would need them to pay rent, to pay their taxes, and to buy everyday things. If you went to an Aztec market 500 years ago and you had 1 cocoa bean, you could buy a tomato or 5 chilies. And if you had 3, you could buy an avocado or a turkey's egg. And if you had 30, you'd be able to buy yourself a rabbit. Now, did you think they would be easy to use as money? I think they'd be easy to carry. You could keep them in your pockets. But the big problem with these is that cocoa beans were one of the first kinds of money where copies or fake cocoa beans had been found. So what people would do is they would break open the cocoa beans and they'd scoop out all of that lovely cocoa, and then they'd fill the shells with mud and then spend them. Our coins and our banknotes have lots of security features that make them hard to copy, but you can't do that with a cocoa bean. Now let's talk about mystery money 3. So this was smooth and soft. It has quite a distinctive smell. You might have seen shoes or bags or gloves made from it. It's leather. Leather has been used as money all around the world, but we think it was first used over 2,000 years ago in China. Now, there was a Chinese emperor who had money made from the skins of his white deer. They were very rare, so he thought this kind of money couldn't be copied. The leather was cut into a 1-foot square with fringe and decorated with a pattern. It's believed to be the beginning of banknotes. And the leather square was used as a promise to pay the person carrying it 400,000 copper coins. Now, our banknotes today still have a promise to pay. You can see it on our banknotes here. Now, the phrase is quite old-fashioned. It dates from a long time ago when our notes represented deposits of gold. So at that time, you could walk into a bank and exchange one of your banknotes for gold of the same value. Our money today is not backed by gold, so you can't do that. But the promise to pay is still there to show that when you're given a banknote, you can be certain of its value. But let's get back to our leather money. Why did you think it was valuable to people? This picture is giving you a bit of a clue. Someone is cutting the leather to make it into something. It was valuable because you can make all sorts of things from leather. Shoes, clothes, bags, gloves, coats, sofas, loads of things. It's still a very popular material. And did you think leather would be easy to use as money? If you remember our polymer banknotes, it has some similar strengths. It's waterproof, it's durable, and it's very difficult to tear. You might want to test that later. But it was never a very popular form of money. It was usually only used when there wasn't enough metal for coins. My favorite example of this is about 200 years ago in the United States. There was a shortage of coins, and deer skins were often used instead. And in the late 1700s, one deer skin could buy you a pair of scissors, and if you had 4 deer skins, you could buy a shirt or an axe. Now, buck is the American word for a male deer, so things were sold for so many buck skins or bucks. And while we don't use leather for money today, that word remains in the American language as the slang word for a dollar. So I grew up saying that cost me $1. Now that brings us to our last kind of mystery money. It is a white cuboid shape. It's hard, but it's also quite fragile, and it's something that we consume every day. You need a little to survive, but too much isn't good for you. It's a bar of salt. It's called an amole. Now, salt has also been used all around the world, but this one comes from Ethiopia in Africa. And bars like this were used as money until about 100 years ago. Now, there's a huge desert in Ethiopia, and there's a thick layer of salt where there used to be an ancient sea. And over time, all the water evaporated and left the salt behind. So you'd have to travel into the desert and then prise the salt out of the ground and hack it into shape. And these bars were really popular because they could be used as money, but also because of the salt. Everyone needs salt. People like it to flavor their food. I like it on my chips. But in many countries, it was essential to your survival. If you're living in a harsh climate in a time before fridges or freezers, it's enormously helpful to have salt to preserve your food and to make it last longer. So this made it extremely valuable. In Ethiopia, about 200 years ago, you could buy 8 chickens for 1 bar of salt. A pig would cost 2 bars, and a horse would cost you 3. Now, did you think it would be easy to use as money? It's a bit big and it was fragile, so you'd have to be very careful when transporting it, but it's not too heavy. It weighs a little less than a kilogram, which is about the weight of a guinea pig. But because the salt bars were so valuable, you wouldn't have needed that many of them. So we have looked at and touched and smelled money from all over the world. And all the things we just looked at were valuable because they were useful. You could do something else with them. The shells and the feathers we looked at the start weren't useful, but they were valuable because they were beautiful and they were hard to get. So as long as everyone agrees on its value, anything can be used as money. I think it's easier to understand why some of the things we've just looked at came to be used as money. We can't even see money when we buy things online, so it's easy to lose track of its value and to spend it without thinking. And the value of the coins and the notes we use today is just something we've agreed upon. The metal and plastic they're made from is hardly worth anything at all. It's not just any bits of metal and plastic that can be used as money, though. They have to have special designs and writing on them to show us that they are real. We can't just make our own coins and spend them in a shop. Someone else has to give permission for them to be made. And that person in our country is the king. That's why his head is on our coins as the queen's was before him. On most coins, the picture on the other side, or the tail side, shows where the coin comes from. These are the new coins that have been made for King Charles, although you might not have seen them just yet. It'll be quite a while before all of our coins have the king's head on them, as they're only being taken out of circulation as the coins with the queen's head become too damaged to be used. Now, these coins are inspired by animals and plants found across Britain. My favorite is the puffin. There's another very useful bit of information the coins give us, which is how much you can spend. And they made the numbers bigger on these coins to make them easier for people to use. On our £1 coins, there's also tiny letters printed over and over again in the rim of the coin. You might just be able to make out the words £1 printed on this picture. So if you have a £1 coin at home, you should try and spot it. And if you remember from cocoa beans, people have been trying to fake money for a long time. This is one of the security features that's been added to make the coin incredibly hard to copy. People use coins as money all over the world. They all show how much they're worth, they show when they were made, and they show us something about where the coin is used. After this workshop, I would like for you to design your own coin. When you design your own coin, you might want to show who's in charge of your money. You might want to show where it's used or how much you can spend, and you might also want to add something to make it hard to copy. Now, you'll be given this circle to draw your coin design, and we will turn your design into a coin badge. Now, please only draw in the inner circle. The outer circle gets wrapped around the badge, so you won't see anything that you draw over that dotted line. When you're happy with your design, your teacher will send them to me at the museum, and we'll turn your designs into badges, and we'll send them back as quickly as we can so you can use them to start talking to people about money. I hope you've started to think about money in a new way. It's really important to develop an understanding of money. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask, please send them in and I will do my very best to answer them. I can't wait to see your marvelous money badge designs. Thanks for watching.